Hi, everybody. Welcome to Relationspaces Power Burst number 12. And I'm Vicky Essebag, and this is Tara Gretton. And today we are asking the question, how does thinking differently make a difference? And it's really about the stories that we tell ourselves. It could be stories that we tell ourselves about ourselves. It could be stories that we tell ourselves about others, about our family members, about our friends, about our colleagues, right? It's really an opportunity for us to think about how are we showing up to this thought? How are we showing up to this thought? So I don't know, one of the things that Tara and I were just talking about as we were entertaining this question is that we often think about how we show up to other things, right? How do we show up to our school? How do we show up to our work? And we have expectations for ourselves about how we do that. But do we do the same for ourselves? Do we think about how we show up for ourselves and how we think about ourselves? And so, yeah, I'm going to leave it like that for now. Tara?
Yeah, thanks, Vicky. I really love that, that making that distinction between, we have these expectations of ourselves of how we show up, almost externally, but how do we show up for ourselves? And, I think instinctively we are much more inclined to think negatively than positively. And, very often that we will think quite negatively about ourselves, and that narrative that we allow to kind of run and to run over and over and over can be quite negative and not always kind and a narrative that's taking care. So, that is our instinct, and that, that part of the way that we think, our brain thinks that it's helping us. It's it's doing its job. It really is. It's trying. However, it's not always useful. So how do we invite a different? How do we reframe that narrative? How do we take a step back? Take a moment and think about, what do I want instead of this? So that's kind of what I'm thinking. How do we have that conversation with ourselves about ourselves? How do we show up for ourselves and start to change that narrative? And, I think having a belief that that change is possible, even though this part of our thinking is like, oh, super strong, this is instinctive, this is the way we're going to do it, but really gently and kindly believing that we can become unstuck from where we're stuck.
Exactly. It's taking that step, or even sometimes taking that leap to be able to say to ourselves, yes, I can at least entertain a different way of thinking. I can start by entertaining a different way of thinking. What does that look like? What does that feel like? Right? And just starting to think about it, just starting to think differently about it, we're already introducing new ideas into that neural pathway that we have that has become so habit forming in the way that we might think.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's so important what you said. And I think, that can feel uncomfortable when that habit is very established, and sometimes, in the want or the attempts to change that can come frustration, and if we're being hard on ourselves in that moment, then it can almost amplify the thing that we're trying to, the thought, the narrative that we're trying to change. So taking care, taking tiny steps and being really gentle. Suppose I was just to think a tiny bit differently about myself in that situation, or generally, as you said, Vicky, what would that look like? What might I be able to say to myself instead of what I'm saying to myself now?
That's right. That's right. It really is a personal kindness, isn't it? It's a personal kindness. We don't need to live with personal narratives that we have. We are the authors of our own lives, and we can change those stories. We have the ability to do it. And really, all we have to do is just start thinking, just developing, just slowly developing a new type of story.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So
Wonderful.
maybe we ask our listeners the question once again, and invite our listeners to ask themselves the very question, which is, how does thinking differently make a difference to you?
Wonderful. And what might you do? What tiny step might you take to just dip your toe, to start to think about how you might think differently about yourself? Brilliant.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. See you next time.
Bye.